First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, Professor Trachtenberg, Uzi Rabi, my dear friend, Tamir Hyman, Ali Savir, shukran. First of all, I'm truly delighted to be here. As you understood from this brief CV and what you heard at the end of this CV, I have been serving as Director General of the MFA since January. And this entire subject of research institutes are quite new to me, but Tamir summoned me, so of course I came, as always. I have to tell you, as I was driving here and thinking about this session, I was thinking about just how far we've come over this past 3 years. And I can also tell you that I was thinking about what other distances we will cover, how far we will reach over this year and in the years to come. I truly believe in that, and I'm going to refer to that later. As you all understand, I'm still in office, so it will be a bit difficult for me to mention any specific names, especially names that are currently relevant or could be relevant in the future, but I think we will manage to somehow get along. So what I was thinking about was the moment before the signing in the summer of 2022. We landed in Abu Dhabi, except for the well-known heat and humidity. There was this feeling of something new as we were flying above Saudi Arabia, and all of a sudden you get to see a new landscape which you didn't see before, and then you land in Abu Dhabi. And its neighboring country is Iran, which is also the topic of today's conference, and you feel like you're in a completely different place. And you understand the geostrategic significance and the change in the paradigm that is about to unfold here. And this change would ultimately impact Israel's economic policy, security policy. And I think that the two superpowers, both Saudi Arabia and Iran, in the terms of the Muslim world and their relations that today as well project on the entire region, what could even say that they project farther than this region. I think they will also impact in the near future the decisions that countries will or won't take, or their policy over the next few days or months. The gist of my professional life was devoted to the strengthening of Israel's security, whether through the thwarting in the operational sector in the Gaza Strip versus Sinai, or in broader context regarding the decision of a policy and executing it when I established the Department for Special Relations in Africa and the Middle East. And I see what I'm doing today as Director General of the MFA as an integral part of this sequence, much more open, overt diplomacy rather than secret or clandestine diplomacy. But in all of my capacities, there is always or has always been the element of interpersonal relations. And this is a point I'm going to address later because it's a very important component for success. Because even when we're talking about a dialogue between countries, the people who are actually engaged in the dialogue are people, human beings. And the explicit advantage of the MFA, on top of its expertise and specialization in foreign relations, in a broad deployment of missions and the access the broad deployment and access to decision makers in the different countries, we consider it great importance in this broad deployment in order to strengthen existing ties and in establishing relations with some other countries as well. So every mission, as it is called, is an embassy, and every such embassy is a certain hub where one can depart from and take things further, both to enhance and even create something new. Just a few weeks ago, I had visited a certain country in Europe, a country which we operate with another third country in Africa. There isn't any geographic linkage or connection, but there are other connections. You identify these connections and you try to create this connection that will ultimately be beneficial to all parties. So as we look at the map of the world, beyond the 108 missions of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, these 108 missions or embassies are responsible for 166 countries that Israel has ties with. Sometimes there are ambassadors who are not located in a specific country but are still responsible for that country. And what stands out here are the countries that are in white. This is what we're interested in. I'd say that there are some bright white countries and other countries that their white is less emphasized to the extent that one can find shades and hues in white. And that's also our target. This is our target. Tamir, you probably are familiar with that from Intel. You decide on a goal, a target, so there's the region that you work on, and that's where we're geared towards. As somebody who was involved in diplomacy, both behind the scenes but also more out in the open, I have to tell you, I don't think that there's any specific recipe or formula for establishing relations with a country, but there are a few things that need to be done. It's definitely about timing and the coming together of interests that can all bring an opportunity, just like in business. I believe that the agreements that we signed, once there was this meeting point of interest, that it was the timing and the right people, it really happened very quickly. These things can sometimes happen very, very quickly. It progressed very quickly, but we also need to understand the elements, the components, in order to inject some more content to our discussion here. So the main components are timing, a meeting point of interest, and interpersonal relations. I think that we can't take out any of these components if we wish to establish relations with a country or to renew relations with a country. These elements all need to be intertwined, and once they are identified, we need to act quickly. Why act quickly? I think this entire forum is very much familiar with the neighborhood we live in. Usually, we encounter surprises in this region, and usually these surprises are negative surprises, so there's always a reason why not to have that party. So once there's an opportunity, you need to seize it in both hands, to act, to find the strong and brave leader, because usually the other side, if it doesn't succeed, they have much more to lose than we do. We, of course, take that into account. So I was thinking, what example can I give you to demonstrate, to illustrate what is normalization? How do you create normalization without truly drilling down into the very specifics of these matters? So I decided to give as an example my personal involvement in advancing relations with Chad. Chad is a country in Africa. It received its independence from France in the 1960s, a population of over 17 million. It's a very big country. And immediately after that, we formed relations with it, but in the early 1970s, speaking of Saudi Arabia, and regardless of the Yom Kippur, the 73 war, it severed its ties with Israel. And ever since, until the renewal of these ties in 2019, we didn't have any relations with Chad. There were several attempts made by Israel to renew its relations with Chad. All failed for various reasons. In March of 2018, I assumed my position at the NSC. I was on a loan from the ISA, the Israel Security Agency. I really didn't know much about diplomacy, foreign relations, mainly with our neighbors, maybe a bit beyond that, but mainly more on the operative side, thwarting activities, but definitely I was never involved in establishing relations. And one of the assignments I received was to allow direct flight lines above Africa so that Israeli airliners could reach more quickly and for a cheaper price, and to make it more convenient for the passengers to reach South Africa and South America. If you look at the map, it means crossing from Israel. In order to cross from Israel, you need to pass through here above Libya and Chad, or over Sudan and Chad. 3 countries. 2 of them are necessary, and anyhow we don't have ties with any of these 3 countries. One of them was colored white, Chad, and today, as you can see, it's yellow. So what do we do? What do we do? We start looking for our contacts to see who's the actual decision maker, who's the ruler, in order to act quickly and reach that decision maker as quickly as possible for the decision to be reached, and then perhaps after that to advance to other things. But it's kind of an opening in the door that we can set foot through, and we did that with some other countries as well. We have normalization with all of them to find a crack in the door that we can enter through, that opening through that crack. Chad seemed very promising. I can tell you that we had 3 parallel channels in our communications with Chad. One promising channel was chosen, ultimately one of the president's sons. So we met with him in a clandestine way. There was very good interpersonal relations. He's a very charismatic guy, very clever guy. And you understand, okay, we formed a relationship here. Because when it's there, it's there. And it was there. So indeed, the 2 other options, we lowered our profiles there. We decided to advance in one main track in order not to generate too much noise, just so that you understand how quickly it proceeds when it proceeds quickly. So the first meeting took place in June of 2018. We had several clandestine meetings with them abroad. We also brought him in Israel, but nobody knew about it. And then in September 2018, we already had a first meeting with the Prime Minister and the contacts as part of the UN conference in one of the hotels. Nobody knew about it. We talked about milestones there. November 2018, 2 months after that, the late Idris Derby came to Israel, and that's when he declared his desire to renew Chad's relations with Israel. And at the end of January 2019, or maybe it was the beginning of February 2019, Prime Minister Netanyahu came for a one-day visit in Chad, where we signed the renewal of the relations and his return, just to show you the connection between the countries. When he returned, he flew over the airspace of Sudan. We received an exceptional permission from Sudan at the time. At the time, nobody knew about the relations with them, and there was a phone call from the head of the Sudanese Intel directorate. That's, maybe I can tell you the story at another opportunity. It's even a bit comical. Chad, actually, the way I see it was the opening of the normalization. That was the first step, even though we still don't have an agreement with it, and we did it almost on our own without any partners such as the US or any other superpower. But in these matters, when you experience success, that always brings along some more success. And I think therefore that if in the future we have another normalization agreement, then it won't be with only one country. It perhaps will be with 2 or even 3 countries. I'd like to say one thing about the personal story, the personal aspect, because when you come to a country that you don't have ties with, in addition to that initial shock when you land in a different country, a different culture, and a different worldview, and it's mutual, they also perceive us as something very different. And we perceive them as something different, and I was surprised in most cases, surprised for the better, I have to say. And with Chad, when he came here for the first time, and it was still done in secret, and I took him to Jerusalem, to East Jerusalem, where he actually saw coexistence. We don't always talk about it, but Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other religions all living in one square kilometer, eating together, doing their shopping together, walking through corridors and alleys together. We also visited Jaffa and the boardwalk in Tel Aviv. He saw another side of Israel. He saw progress, modernity, technology, and then he said, you know what, Maoz? It's so different than how we perceive it, how we imagined it, even from the way my father perceives things. So these things are extremely important. They're extremely important. It's so important to show these new guests, as I call them, who come to visit us, to show them the good sides, not good sides, not necessarily what they sometimes see on the news, on TV. I recently visited an Arab country. It was towards the end of this last round, this last campaign, and I said, let's see what you can see on the news. So I turned on the TV on the local channel, and when I met with that person, I said, wow, listen, these Israelis, believe you me, you see how one-sided it is, how biased. And you understand what an impact that has on the general population, on public opinion. But the surprising thing is that in certain areas, even in areas in Africa, which people sometimes pay less attention to, whenever we conduct polls, you can identify some sympathy for Israel and even a desire to become closer to Israel in order to establish stability, job security, to bring in progress, modernity, agriculture, things that they want. And here on these matters, we have advantages. And that's exactly what we mean to do and what we do in our communications with the different countries that are painted in a friendly white.
Countries have an interest in establishing relations with Israel. I saw this when I retired, when various elements from different countries approached me, and in the last 5 months in my position now, and there are relations, contacts with other countries. Will they all materialize? Not certain, but there are positive trends. As I said, the timing, the conditions, the joining of interest have to materialize. We have to assist in this. Some will take time. But there is an influence of the previous agreements, tourism, commerce, that we have with UAE, the good relations we have with Bahrain, the good relations and tourism with Morocco. These 3 countries that are the most prominent They are like an engine, a driver of positive, driving to white. And other countries look at them. They look and they ask. As they ask Chad. Countries always check the pulse. What's going on? Two sentences before I conclude.
אני חזרתי בשבוע שעבר מביקור ראשון בארצות הברית, בתפקידי הנוכחי. אני יכול להגיד שהיו שם פגישות מאוד מאוד מעניינות, מאוד תורמות. יש פה מחויבות אמריקאית להרחבת מעגל הנורמליזציה ברחבי העולם. אני חושב שהנורמליזציה עם סעודיה זה צעד חשוב מאוד. אך במסגרת מעמד זה אסור לנו להזניח אפיקים במדינות אחרות, אולם אפשר לממש את הפוטנציאל עוד לפני סעודיה. והן חשובות לא פחות אגב. לסיכום, ואני מקווה שבחודשים הקרובים אולי נעדכן את המפה, אולי אפילו בכנס הבא נעדכן את המפה, יהיה פחות אזורים לבנים, שזה עושה רק טוב למדינת ישראל, עושה רק טוב לאזור. אין ואקום, במקומות שאנחנו לא נמצאים בדרך כלל, גורמים
elements
לא שאנחנו רוצים נמצאים
that we do not want enter.
אז תודה רבה לכם.
So thank you all very much.